Hello, and thanks for joining us today as we continue our study in the book of Ecclesiastes. Today we are in chapter 11, and we've been following the outline series of this from the workbook that Mike Willis produced, dealing with this information shared with us by the great King Solomon from years ago. Today in chapter 11, Solomon begins to give us just some general advice for life. He has talked about a wide variety of topics as we've gone through his writings thus far, and this chapter goes a little bit of a different direction in terms of the choices that we may make in this life. Looking at verse 1, he says, "Cast thy bread upon the waters, for thou shalt find it after many days." A lot of folks have wondered about the meaning of that passage. There's several different interpretations of it, and that's what the author asks in question 1. What does cast your bread upon the waters mean? Now, some people take that to mean that he is saying that you should somewhat have a diverse investment procedure, that maybe many different ships going overseas would be better than just one. But it's kind of taking a very literal approach to what he has to say here. And I tend to think about it in maybe more general terms. Here he's talking about something that you need to do. He said, you need to cast your bread upon the waters. In other words, you've got to put yourself out there. You're going to have to venture into the uncharted seas of life, making decisions and trying to do what you think is to be the best based upon the wisdom that God has given to you. So you're going to be involved in this. You've got to be investing yourself. Cast your bread upon the waters. Do your thing. Put your input in. Live your life. For who knows where it's going to go. But he gives some consolation here. He says, thou shalt find it after many days. And that takes us to question 2. The author says, what result comes from this conduct? Have you ever noticed when you're around a body of water and the waves are lapping to the shore, you could throw a small piece of wood or something that would float a ways out into the water, and it floats around for a while, bobbing on those waves, and then gradually it's pulled back to you. And pretty soon that small piece of wood that you threw out there, unless it's caught up in a current and carried off in some way, is going to be gently brought back to your feet. Brought right back to the shore from whence you cast it. Whenever we do our best, we invest ourselves in life. We try to do all the good that we can. We try to sow the seed of the kingdom. We try to love God first and love our neighbor as ourselves. These efforts of good come back to bless us. And so it is with the story that Solomon is sharing here. That good is not wasted. It may not be given high marks by others around us, but the great God of heaven sees, and he is the author of every good and perfect gift. So when we put ourselves out there, live our lives, do all the good that we can do, I think this is Solomon's way of saying, rest assured, God will take care of you. That good will come back to you for all of those efforts that you put forth. Both in this life, as Jesus said, he came that we might have life and have it more abundantly, but not only in this life, but much more so in the life that is to come. When we do the will of the Father and actually are engaged in that, good is going to come. In question 3, the author asks, should this be the motive for this conduct? What should that motive be? Are you doing it to make yourself look grand? What's behind your casting your bread out upon the waters? Well, I believe that what he's saying here in terms of his motivation is just do what you can, when you can, because you just don't know the timetable of when that good may come back to bless you. Notice what he says, you shall find it after many days. There may not be some immediate feedback from the good that you do. And our good work should not have an ulterior motive of, or I do this, so maybe they'll do this for me. It's just doing good because it's the right thing to do. And as we establish that pattern of living and doing good for others, you're going to find others being willing to give back to you in a great abundant blessing. And given in such measure, it'll be pressed down and running over, because God will note the good and others will note the good that we do in our lives, and it will come back to be a blessing on us, both in physical, literal terms in this short life, but then eternally as we lay up for ourselves treasures in heaven. In question 4, what is the motivating factor of benevolence in verse 2? He says, give a portion to 7, and also to 8, for thou knowest not what evil shall be upon the earth. The point that I believe Solomon is making here is help others while you can, because you just don't know when even your conditions may change and you may not be able to be a help to others anymore. You may go through a rough spot and be the recipient of blessings from other people. We simply need to take advantage. And he says not just to 1 or 2. He goes on to 7, even to 8. In other words, keep looking for opportunities. Don't be content with having done just a dab here and a dab there, but rather instead be active and busy, always trying to look out for your neighbor, always trying to give to him that needeth, trying to be a blessing to other people. Because life is uncertain, and our fortunes can change for a wide variety of reasons, and what a blessing it is when that good comes back to be heaped upon us. In question 5, to whom should our benevolence be shown? Here in verse 2. He says, give a portion to 7, also to 8, for thou knowest not what evil shall be upon the earth. You give it to whoever needs it. The number that's here, the 7, the 8, that's a figurative expression, I believe. It's not just keeping track of it, and I get to 7 or 8, and now I can close my purse and turn my back on all the other needy. But rather what he's saying here is this is a habit for us. It develops as to being sort of second nature for us to look out for the good of others. What can I do to help them? What can I do to be a blessing to them? And we're looking for those opportunities. In question 6, the author asks, what does verse 3 teach in this context? Well, if the clouds be full of rain, they empty themselves upon the earth. And if the tree falleth toward the south or toward the north, in the place where the tree falleth, there it shall be. There are going to be ups and downs that are going to occur to us in this life. And sometimes those vast changes in fortune may be rather dramatic. But as the old expression goes, when it rains, it pours. He says that here that can be in a good way or a bad way. But I believe in the context of this benevolence, it is wonderful to pour out abundantly upon those who are struggling mightily. Because the tree falls, and it lands with a thud, and it lands in a hard place. And often whenever you have to work with that, it's going to be challenging. So doing these actions of good are not always going to be easy. It's going to require effort. And there are sometimes we may find ourselves straining mightily in this life. But through all of these verses, Solomon is saying, what you've cast upon the water is going to come back. There will be others who care. There will be other blessings to come your way, even when you hit the tough spots in this life. So the blessings are there, whether we're on the top of the mountain or whether we're going through struggle. And we need to be thankful to God for all of the good that he sends our way. The author asks in question 7, what danger is mentioned in verse 4? Here he says, he that observeth the wind shall not sow, and he that regardeth the clouds shall not reap. Have you ever met somebody who was such a worrywart that they were simply incapacitated by their worries and fears? They were afraid to do anything because it may not work out right. It may not be what I planned. It may not, and they worry and fret and worry and fret and wind up doing absolutely nothing. We can worry ourselves into inaction. And I believe that's what Solomon is warning us about here. There could be a bad wind. It might turn to a bad day, so maybe I'd better not sow. Or, there might be clouds out there. It might be rainy day, so I know I've got a crop in the field, but maybe I shouldn't risk going out there and trying to harvest it today. Well, yeah, things may happen, but then again, they may not. And we can't let those fears render us incapable of acting. We can't worry about all the what ifs. What if this or what if that? For the vast majority of those what ifs never come to pass. Go ahead and do what's right. Do it with all of your energy. And whatever obstacles get in your way, then deal with those. But do not let the worry and all the what ifs so discourage you that at the least little whimper of opposition, you fold up, well, I just can't. And you give in and don't even try to push to do good and to be the blessing that God intends for you to be. In question 8, what does man not know, according to verse 5? As thou knowest not what is the way of the Spirit, nor how the bones do grow in the womb of her that is with child, even so thou knowest not the works of God, who maketh all. The point that Solomon is saying is that there's just a lot of variables. There are a lot of things that you just don't know and haven't got any way of knowing. The works of God are beyond our understanding, and things are going to happen that we don't understand. We don't see the big picture. We don't have perfect knowledge. We don't know the intricacies of every challenge and detail. He gives some examples here, the bones of an unborn child and how they are all put together. God put all that creative process in place. So respect it, appreciate it, treasure it, and make the best of it. And even though you may have an incomplete knowledge, that should not prevent you from trying to do what you can. And sometimes we understand, well, why isn't this easy? Why is there all of this adversity? Maybe God's just helping us stretch and grow a little bit. He's helping us to do some soul searching and reflecting. He's helping us to be sure that we understand why we are doing what we are doing. And we're striving to be worthy servants even when opposition arises. And so God says, don't worry about all those things you don't know. There's things that are beyond your ability to find out. And you just do not know what is the way of the Spirit. There's all kinds of unexplained and unexpected things that may happen. But Solomon says, don't fold your hands and sit back and say, oh, well, I just can't. Live your life. Do what's good. Do what's right. Enjoy the time that you have here and be the servant of God that He wants you to be. In question 9, he said, what should be our conduct in light of these facts? Looking to verse 6. He says, in the morning sow thy seed, and in the evening withhold not thine hand. For thou knowest not whether shall prosper either this or that, or whether they both shall be alike good. Once again, he's saying, you don't know. As the farmer goes out to plant his seed, he has to plant it in faith. It could be a wonderful growing season with bountiful crops. Or there may be a lot of unexplained and unexpected hardships. What if the rains don't come at the right time? Or whenever it's time to harvest, it just rains and rains and rains, so that harvest is very difficult to reap. There are all kinds of things that might happen, and we have no control over those things. So it says, in the morning sow thy seed. Now it's time. You have the ability, you have the opportunity. Do what you can. And in the evening withhold not thine hand. Oh, I'm getting tired. It's getting a little bit late. I guess I'll call it a day. When maybe there's an urgency in pressing a little bit harder, pushing on and putting in extra effort, putting in that overtime, striking while the iron is hot, so to speak, working that job and getting that project finished, because maybe there won't be a chance to get back to add more to it. So basically what Solomon is saying here is do what you can when you can. Live life to the fullest and don't let it just pass you by. In question 10, he says, what do verses 7 and 8 counsel? In verse 7, truly the light is sweet, And a pleasant thing it is for the eyes to behold the sun. But if a man live many years and rejoice in them all, yet let him remember the days of darkness, for they shall be many. All that cometh to vanity. Here he's making the point that there's going to be a lot of good times and good moments that you enjoy in this life, but there's also going to be a lot of dark days too. There are going to be those days of hardship. There are going to be those days of sorrow. There are going to be those days of setback. And someone who lives a long life is able to reflect back over all of those things, and hopefully they can rejoice in a large number of good moments, but also be thankful that they survived those darker days as well. And when those dark days come, you just take it in stride. You learn from the darkness. You come out on the other side a better person, more patient, stronger, more confident in the ability of God to help because he just bailed you out again. And you continue your growth process of growing stronger in the grace and knowledge of the Lord. Enjoy the good days. Also endure the dark days of darkness, and realize that God's hand is there to help you through it all. In question 11, why should a young man rejoice in his youth? Here Solomon turns his attention to a very, very important topic. In verse 9 he says, Rejoice, O young man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth, and walk in the ways of thine heart, and in the sight of thine eyes. But know thou that all these things God will bring thee into judgment. Solomon's an older man as he writes this. He helps us to see that in the earlier chapters of this book, he is reflecting back over a wonderful life and all of the things that had happened to him along the way. And here he's sharing the wisdom that you're only young once. There are going to be unique opportunities that you can perform in your youth. Interesting opportunities, certain learning situations, certain skills you can develop, and you'll have the ability to do that maybe in your youth, but then as you age, maybe some of those skills will no longer be possible. Life can change for you. So while you are young, enjoy your life. Enjoy the opportunities that God sets before you. There are certain joys that are unique to your youth. There are things he's going to say in chapter 12, talking about how we change as we age. We're not as strong as we used to be. Our eyesight and hearing are not as sharp as they used to be. So while we have those days of youth, use them, enjoy them, and ultimately are able to reflect back over those with a lot of good memories of all the great things that God has done for you. But notice what else he says here in the latter part of this verse. But know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. Here you are living your days in cheer, enjoying your youth. He says, walk in the ways of thine heart and the sight of thine eyes. Take advantage of your opportunities, but always remember that God is watching. And we will be brought into account for everything that we choose to do. And so just because we have the ability, the option, all these wonderful things are laid before us, that does not give us permission in our lives to somehow take a break from religious things and live wildly and disrespectfully toward God and others. Enjoy your youth, but be a worthy young person as you proceed down your journey of life. There in question 13, he says, what is wrong with the advice that one should sow his wild oats while he is young? That's the advice that some people have lived by, that you should be wild in your youth, and it's to be expected that you should do all kinds of wild and outlandish things because you're just young. That's not an excuse. And that's what Solomon's helping us see here. God is watching even in our youth as to the choices that we make. Paul told the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 10, we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in his body according to that he hath done, whether it be good or bad. God's taking note of the choices that we make. He wants us to use the energy of youth in good and positive ways. And while we may make mistakes through inexperience, we need to learn from those mistakes and strive to do better. We have a God that forgives us, but He also has high expectations of our repentance and faithful living. Sometimes people think I can live and sow my wild oats, I'll repent later, but they so injure their health and take wild and foolish chances that they never live to experience those days of repentance and reform, because they simply slid too far into the darkness. So here Solomon's helping the young man to understand it's okay to be young. It's okay to enjoy life, to be of a cheerful disposition, but just understand the rules and laws of God. And then finally, in verse 10, he says, "Therefore remove sorrow from thine heart, and put away evil from thy flesh. For childhood and youth are vanity." He talks about the worthlessness of our childhood and youth in the sense that it's not going to be a condition that lasts forever. We're going to grow older if we are allowed to live. So as he counsels here, enjoy your days. Every season of your life, live it to the fullest and enjoy it. Enjoy even our youth. But be mindful of the fact that it's going to change. It's vanity. It's worthless in the sense it's not going to be a permanent condition. Sometimes folks struggle in trying to work through the changes in the seasons of their lives. They want to chase their youth all of their days. And they get on up to older age and they want to try to behave like they're still a teenager. And it's not very becoming of them, because they should be able to use their wisdom to give counsel and live in grace. Be able to be gracious instructors of others and teachers of good things. So we don't want to let our youth become such an obsession with us that we fail to see the rest of the story of what God has laid out for us in the days that are yet ahead, should the Lord give us those days to experience. So Solomon here is just helping us to understand the full spectrum of life, to do all the good that you can, and realize that that good will come back to you. Be understanding that there's going to be unexpected moments in life. There are going to be days of darkness, but God will see you through those, and you will always have the wonderful, joyous memories of those good days to sustain you, even in those moments of discouragement and depression, when it feels like, well, now I've gotten old and I can't do anything. You've got all the memories of what you've done and the opportunities that are now available to you in your new season of life. To always just bemoan the days of our youth, he says it is vanity. It's not going to last. Those days were a set season in your life, but now you move on beyond that. So Seer Solomon is just helping us to see all of the great opportunities that God lays before us from the days of our youth on through the days of our older age. And we should take advantage of every wonderful opportunity that God sets before us. Well, I appreciate you joining us today as we've gone through this 11th chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes. And next week we will be looking at the final chapter of this section of wisdom that Solomon has shared with us. And we hope that you'll join us then. Until next time, this is Dale Robbins from the Eubank Church of Christ saying goodbye and hope that you'll join us again soon.